Welcome back, everybody. Conversation number 64. And we've got June back for part 2 of her conversation, where she's going to prove. We don't prove anything, we provide evidence, but June is going to prove the value of analytics in part 2 of her conversation. And you might remember that she's a data leader of a large tech company. She is a long-time analytics leader. We're not going to call her the grandmother because, but she is a analytics leader in the industry. She's one of the great founders of the digital analytics industry. We all know her and love her for what she's done with the, what do we call it? The data analytics. Oh my gosh, June, help me.
Are you talking about the Digital Analytics Association?
Yes, digital analytics. Yes, oh my gosh, because I was thinking web analytics. And
well, it was
stuck in my head and I couldn't make it happen. So anyway, yes. She has deep knowledge of marketing and product analytics, global industry board experience. She's an angel investor. And she's just a wonderful, wonderful person. If you need advice about anything, go to June, because she has fantastic advice and she will challenge you and make you better. This fun fact that actually Tim provided, she is one of the founders of Web Analytics Wednesday. So thank you, June. I have a question that I want to put out there for everybody. This was about a month ago that we got this new slide deck, and it's got the Twitter bird on it, which I think we now know is no longer a Twitter bird. And I kind of fundamentally against changing it to the X. Anybody have any strong feelings about whether or not we want to change it to the X, or are you moving, June? Are you going to stay on?
Oh, I'm not. I gave up on Twitter or X or whatever it is. I'm horrified actually to see my handle there because I haven't been active for quite a while.
Yeah,
more people are.
Are you going to Threads? Are you going to, what are you going to do?
And maybe it's Slack communities like the one that you have that are more intentional, smaller places for people to have deeper conversations. Those are the kinds of things we might want to list in the future. Like, here are the Slack communities that I'm active on. That's my suggestion.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I'm going to pass it over to you, and we should have that debate.
Yeah, definitely. Come back. All right. Can you see my screen? Great. I am so happy to be here. By the way, Kelly, thank you so much for inviting me back. You may or may not know that the origin story of TLC happened at the Symphonic Exchange Conference 10 years ago. TLC just had their 10th anniversary. Woohoo. And I was there. I don't think I was there in the room for the huddle about experimentation, but I was there with Kelly. And so I am just so pleased to see what has become of that. And I've actually had several recent conversations with other people who used to go to Symphonic Exchange and DA Hub, which it became later. And I'm just saying great things about, what the value that we got out of having those small group conversations and the connections that we made that we still have. Thank you. I'm so glad to see that this has come of it. Kelly already went through this, so I'm going to only cover some points that she didn't mention. I've been a DAA board member for going on 9 years here, and as I say this here in July 2023, we are coming up on DAA 1 conference in October in Chicago, and so if you are enjoying hearing about the topics that you hear about on TLC, it's a great conference that I would highly recommend that you attend. During the day, I'm a data leader at a large tech company headquartered in Seattle. I've been there for over 7 years, and I've specialized in media and entertainment, both streaming video and also audio subscription services, and it's really fun. On the side, I'm an angel investor in data startups. The one that I am involved in and get to claim co-founder credit for is called Invest in Data. Angel Investing Syndicate. We evaluate new technology that chief data officers might buy. And to me, that gives me like this really interesting window on new trends and technologies that are coming up that we might be using 6 months from now or years from now. Oh yeah, I've been in analytics my entire professional career, 25 years at this point. So I want to start with a question. And I know that, this talk is actually meant for data practitioners in general. And I realize that many people here listening live are specialized in A/B testing and experimentation. So I'm curious to see how you're going to answer it. If you're an analyst, you're in a team of analysts in like the most general sense. Here's my question. Do you really know whether insights that you deliver truly influence business outcomes? Do you? If you do, raise your hand. I would say your virtual hand, and Kelly can say how many we get. Do you really know whether you're influencing business outcomes? We got some. All right. I'll stop at this point. Kelly, how many do we have? Like, what percentage of total would you say? You're counting. Lots of them. Oh, you're on mute.
Not lots.
Not lots. Oh,
No.
that's surprising, because I think that that when you run experiments, you're like the closest to actually being able to prove that value in a systematic way, right? When I have given a similar talk in different venues, and I will get crickets. I'll get a room of 100 people, and we have a couple timid people raise their hand, and I'm not sure that they really understand what I'm asking. This is a really hard thing to do. And this is the topic that I'm going to explore with you over the course of this talk. Let me tell you about why I think that you should care. I think this is an important thing to care about, even though it's hard. Is if you are an individual, say you are an analyst, you want to know that the work that you are doing and delivering is getting used. And you want to get recognition and credit for that work. If you are an analytics leader, say you're a marketing analytics manager or you're a chief data officer, you also want to know that your work is getting used, and you want to get recognition and credit for that work, like your team's work. And you also want to use that to grow your team and to justify your budget, right? Prove to me that it's working. If you are a business leader, say you're not in analytics at all, you want to know also that all this analytics stuff that's happening in your company is actually worth it. That's why you should care. But as I mentioned earlier, I believe that this is a pretty hard problem. I think that Albert Einstein said it best when he said that not everything that can be counted counts, and not everything that counts can be counted. More specifically, barriers exist to doing this. We can say, oh yeah, we can quantify the value of what we're doing, but when you get down to it tactically, there are lots of things that really get in your way. Also, if you don't land it well, there's sort of this negative connotation that it's like a land grab for credit. And if you do it right, it's about sharing the glory with everyone who contributed to that business outcome, right? This also takes some finesse. It's really hard to prove impact. There are all these like hops along the way. You can say, I think this was impactful. I think this is impactful. It's hard to really prove it. And in the end, it's squishy. It's just a story you tell. And so the rest of my talk is about how to tell a convincing story. This is a setup. In analytics, in the perfect world, you're going to have a vision. Your team's going to have a charter. You'll have a strategic plan for the current year. Maybe you'll also have a 3-year plan. You'll have a chief data officer, and you'll have executives who are already convinced that data is important. But let's be honest, nobody lives in a perfect world. So as you are listening to what I am saying, I want you to think about how you can take it and adapt it and use it no matter where you're at. I want to start by talking about proving the value of analytics, by talking about goals, because I think that's how we should frame it. And when I started thinking about the different kinds of goals that an analytics team takes, I realized, in my mind anyway, that it's a hierarchy. And so I want to walk you through how I think about this hierarchy. And I'm going to start, I'm going to start at the bottom, at the foundation. An analytics team can set goals around organizational data literacy. If you do not have this, if the people in your organization don't even know how to think about using analytics in the business, you need to start there with your goals. One level up from that is something I call responsiveness. Say that your analytics team is operating basically as a service desk, and you have some kind of ticketing system, say that it's Jira, and people file tickets and they ask for stuff and you give them stuff. Responsiveness goal could be something about like how many tickets you received last quarter, or how many tickets you closed last quarter, or the time it took you to close tickets, something about an SLA. Not a great kind of goal, but still it's a starting point and it shows a little bit of momentum. Up a level from that is delivery, shipping things. What is it that your analytics team does and produces? What are your artifacts? Maybe you're implementing a new analytics platform. You deliver it. That could be a goal. What about you are writing 5 analysis documents this quarter? That could be a goal, right? The shipping things. You don't know that it actually gets received. You just know that you're producing. One level up from that is adoption and usage. Going back to the example of an analytics platform, if you delivered the analytics platform, it only really matters if people start adopting it and then you continuing to use it over time. When I talk about users, say monthly active users, in this talk, I'm talking about monthly active users of the people who work for your company, right? Because for an analytics team, MAUs are your own colleagues. So I'm not talking about like MAUs of the end customers of your business, right? Difference. Up from adoption and usage, there's satisfaction. So you run a survey, ask people how they feel about the value of the analytics that you are delivering. That's satisfaction. So I think getting a qualitative angle on it can be a good way to get the sense of the perception of value, which I think is pretty important. Up a level from that, and I see this as kind of close to the pinnacle, is actionability. You're responsive, you're delivering, people are using your things, you're pretty satisfied with it. Are they actually taking it and using it to improve the business? If you can show that and set goals around that, that's actionability. And at the very top, in the little triangle, I have dollar. And the reason why I have dollar is because it was a small triangle and that's all that would fit. But it's shorthand for making money, saving money, keeping customers happy, right? The kinds of things that we all want to accomplish for our business. And this is the end goal, right? It can be very hard to set a goal for an analytics team that is dollars. But if you can, more power to you. Can't say it always working. Where I'm going to focus this talk is here in this red box, adoption, usage, satisfaction, and actionability, which I think it is kind of the sweet spot for talking about the value of analytics. And when we think about different kinds of goals, I like to think about it there are 2 different kinds, input goals and output goals. Input goals are the kinds of things that you can directly influence and control that you believe drives an outcome. And an outcome goal is the thing that you're trying to drive, right? So some of the best goals, I think, are the input goals. This is what we have control over. So I'm going to start talking about in a little bit more detail about adoption and usage. Adoption and usage can be a really great way to understand self-service effectiveness. If that is an important part of what your team is striving for, then think about measuring this. You should at least have one goal that measures it. On the positive side, if people are using the things you make, they probably find some kind of value on it. You don't know for sure, but it's a signal, right? And it's pretty easy to measure. So you're using Tableau. You can get monthly active users of your dashboards in Tableau and see who's using them. On the negative side, just because people are using the stuff that you've created does not mean it leads to real value. They might just be logging into the dashboard, looking at it and saying, good to know. And that's not real value. Also, you have to realize that you have a captive audience here for most of the things that you deliver as an analytics team. You may have something that you've produced that has, high monthly active users, but it might only be high because they have nowhere else to go to get that information. That said, here's a sample goal for adoption and usage. Reach 70 first-time users and get 30 MAUs in this new tool that we just stood up by the end of the year. You could set a goal like that for an analytics team. Let's move on and talk about satisfaction. We run surveys to understand satisfaction. I am a huge proponent of this because I think that surveys are a great way to complement usage metrics to give you the more complete picture. What's the perception of value? On the negative side, you know what? People lie. They will lie on a survey. Even if you say, oh, this survey is anonymous, you don't have to identify yourself. When you're sending out a survey to your own colleagues, even if you don't have people self-identify, it's pretty easy to piece together who people are when they respond. And as a result, you might not get the whole truth. And you can either live with that, or if you can afford it, you can pay an external third party to do this kind of satisfaction scoring for you, where people may be less inclined to lie. It can also be a struggle to get enough responses to a survey. It depends on the company. Sometimes it works really well, and sometimes it just falls flat and no one will respond. If you are struggling with getting surveys to work, and you've tried all the things you can try, there are some alternatives. You could run a focus group, or you could have one-on-one conversations to collect anecdotal feedback. There are other ways that you can understand stakeholder satisfaction, and you should find a way that works for you. Also, you can't easily compare across surveys. I advocate for running surveys 2 to 3 times a year. You're not going to get the same people responding on each survey. People leave the company, people join the company, people are on vacation when the survey's out, whatever it is. So it's not necessarily the same group of people responding each time. Also, survey results might be at odds with your strategic priorities. Let me give you an example. This is the most vexing thing. Say that you work in an organization that has data analysts that are mapped into different business stakeholder groups, right? So maybe there's an acquisition marketing group, and you have a marketing analyst, and that marketing analyst specializes in just acquisition marketing. And then there's, a product group, and there's one product, and you have a product analyst who's specialized in just that one product. It's great. When you have that kind of a setup, stakeholders tend to be really happy if they have support, direct support. But say instead that you decide to shift your strategy to pull back some of those analysts that are deeply embedded in specific areas, and have those analysts instead focus on things that matter to the entire business, right? That might be the most important thing to do from a strategy perspective, but it's also going to lead to lower satisfaction from the people who no longer have that direct support, right? So your satisfaction score is going to go down. It might be okay. Here's a goal that you could use for satisfaction. Improve our team's stakeholder satisfaction from 60% to 80% over the course of a year. This requires that you run multiple surveys a year, or at least annually. Oh, if you want to take a picture of this, I'm going to show this QR code a few times, and it will take you to a Google Drive folder where I have some templates for you. Some of the templates are sample surveys that you can use to gauge stakeholder satisfaction for analytics teams. My advice to you, when you're designing your survey, match your questions to your team's vision. I've given you a couple of samples, a couple of templates, but you're going to need to adapt them according to what makes sense for your organization and what your objectives are. But let me give you a couple examples. If your data org is focused on insight generation, you might ask satisfaction questions like agreement with the statement, my analyst comes to me proactively with insights. How proactive are they, right? My analyst work often forms the basis for decisions and actions. So this one gets at the perception of actionability and value. On the other hand, maybe your org is focused more on self-service, right? You could ask agreement with the statement, I'm able to get data in a time frame that meets my business need. So everyone in the company, they have a need for data. Can I get it fast enough? You could also ask about, say, a specific product that you have. Maybe it's a dashboard, and you could ask your stakeholders agreement with the statement, this dashboard makes me better at my job. And if they say that it does, I think that that's something that shows that there's value in the dashboard that you've made. All right, actionability, moving up the pyramid. I want to encourage you, if your team is focused on insight generation, to actually take the trouble to track actionable insights. The positive side of doing this, I think it gets closer to actual business value. If you are able to, when you deliver something to a business stakeholder, to get feedback from them to show that they've taken what you've given them and they've used it to influence their roadmap or improve the customer experience or as the basis for a test, right? That's closer to actual business value. And this can be a really wonderful way to connect the work of the individuals on the ground working as analysts to make recommendations that get acted upon. It allows leaders who are all the way at the top to be able to inspect and recognize the work of those individuals. And I've seen this in action. And I think it's a really rare thing. But if you take the trouble to say, we made this recommendation, it resulted in this action, and you surface those occasionally for the leaders, they can recognize and value that work, which is what we're talking about today. On the negative side, and there are plenty of negatives, man, we're just creating homework for ourselves. This is a lot of work. It's just accounting, right? Because if you think about it, ideally, every time an analyst on your team delivers an insight, they need to make sure to follow it through to see whether it was acted upon. That's a lot of work. And it's also somewhat subjective. If I say, oh yeah, this qualifies as actionable, you might not agree with me that it qualifies as actionable. And it takes a little bit of time to kind of reach consensus on what qualifies as actionable. I'm going to give you an example of that in a bit. Here's a sample goal for actionable insights. And this is for a product analytics organization, just as an example. So deliver 40 insights this year that either lead to experiments or influence the product roadmap. This is what this team will do. Aha, back to the templates, the same thing I showed you earlier. This time is to mention a tracker that I made that contains some just fake samples of how you might think about tracking insights for your team. And let me walk you through these. So the first row has an example that's a cohort analysis. And so imagine that there's a data analyst and they did this project where they went out to understand the usage of a certain product feature that new customers were using in their first 3 months. And when they were done with their analysis, they recommended some usability and placement improvements. And they delivered it to their stakeholders. And the stakeholders, when they asked them, what action did you take? What decision did you make? The stakeholders are, oh yeah, we incorporated those recommendations you gave us into our product roadmap. Does that count toward the goal? Is that actionable? Yes, I would say yes. Second example, benchmarking. So this data analyst was asked to provide some data that shows the usage levels of a certain product feature, is basically a data table, and they handed it over to the stakeholders. Here you go. And the stakeholders took it, they received it, they did not take any action. And when asked about it, they said, good to know. That does not qualify as actionable. Sadly, there's a whole category of work that analysts often get caught up doing that's in this category, but at least this kind of accounting makes it more clear to the team what portion of the work falls into this category. And final example is opportunity sizing. So in this case, this is also a global product of some kind. The analyst came in after a product was released in one country, and they sized the opportunity associated with releasing the same product in other countries. And out of this, they recommended the top 5 countries for expansion of this product, where are we going to get the most value? And they handed it over to the business stakeholders, and the business stakeholders said, well, we looked at what you gave us, analysts, but we haven't taken any action yet. Like, we're not ready to expand in new countries. And so this one, it actually may become actionable, but it's not yet. And so there's some period of time where it's worth waiting. Eventually, you got to have a cutoff, but for this one, it has potential to be actionable, but you can't say it is yet. I have some tips if you're going to go down this route for the analyst who is doing the work. Before you start in on your work, have the stakeholder you're working with define success criteria. Often, I keep going back, it's just like the perception of value. Make sure you understand how they perceive value and that you're working towards something that will support that. And when you're done with your work, ask your stakeholder, the person you deliver it to, did you actually take an action? Get in writing. Be persistent. You might have to ask a few times, but I think it's worth it. Tips for the analytics leader. You got to hold the line. Think about this. Should you even be taking on projects where the measurable business outcome is not clear before you start? Should you? Sometimes you have to, but the more you can do to set things up to say, here's the impact and the value we expect to achieve, the better things will turn out. Also, be fair. You're going to need to be the one to set guidelines to judge whether or not the analyst work qualifies as actionable. And if you do this and you continue to do it and you make a system of it, you get validation, credit, and confirmation of the value of analytics. It's a cycle though, and it's something that you don't just do once, you need to continue. And so here's a plan. Here's a plan for you. Set your goals. Set them annually. I know right now we're halfway through the year, but if you don't have goals, set some now. Think about next year. Run satisfaction surveys. I recommend 2 or 3 times a year. I think fewer than that, you're not getting enough signal. More than that, you're going to burn people out. but this will keep you in touch with how people are perceiving the value of what you are delivering. Take time to review goal progress with business leaders. You have goals. Are you actually achieving those goals? Are you transparent about that? Do that quarterly. Call it a QBR, quarterly business review. Don't take it just to the analytics team, take it to the leaders of the stakeholder organization that you support and show them how you're doing on the things that you said that you were going to do. Also, if you're tracking actionability stories, give examples of those. Say, here's work our analysts have done that turned into something that was actionable for the business. Do that quarterly. Write up stories about what's actionable. I recommend doing this monthly. You're going to have at least one of these stories once a month. Prioritize your analyst work. Say your analyst team works on sprints. They're doing work. Are they doing the right work? Is it prioritized in the right way? Every 2 weeks, check in on that. Is it still prioritized in the right way? Take the time to reset your priorities or reconsider your priorities every couple of weeks for analyst work. Analyst work itself, continuous, always on, always doing it. And here is the system that you can use to prove the value of analytics. Thank you.
Awesome. Thanks, June.
Yep.
As always, love the templates. Leave that up there so people can take the pictures to grab the templates. Sure. Corey Underwood made a really good point, which actually will lead us into next week's talk on privacy. But since he may not be able to be there next week, I want to make the point. I'm scrolling up over here on the Slack channel to get to it. He said, where is it, Corey? The value of analytics has drifted over time as data privacy regulations increase. The volume of analytics hits to third-party platforms decreases, so it becomes more directional. For a recent example, GA is very common and used by a lot of healthcare providers, but recent guidance from HHS and the FTC has seen multiple healthcare clients give up GA after Google made it clear they did not intend to make GA HIPAA compatible.
Yeah.
Does analytics have value for them? Sure, but it also has risk.
It does. The way that I would approach that is what exists within your responsible boundaries as an opportunity to deliver something valuable. And you might go beyond that to say, well, if I could just join this kind of thing to that kind of thing, or if I could just scrape that kind of thing, I could do something that's much more valuable. Don't go there. You know, if that is not within the constraints that you must operate on, then think about what you can responsibly do and show the value there. And if you get questioned on that, well, why can't we join this customer data to that customer data? Then, you know, you say, I'm sorry, but that's out of bounds.
Yeah. Ronnie Kahavi says, for hold the line, measurable business outcome must be clear. I think it's much more important to ask what decision will change given the analysis. Is there a threshold below or above for which a business decision will change?
Yeah. I've seen also something Tim Wilson wrote a really long time ago that said the same thing. And I do think that's brilliant, because if we're just delivering analyses that don't change the thing that we were already going to do anyway, then it's not really worth doing. And so making the point to ask upfront about like, how will this change your thinking? How, you know, what is the thing that you will do that's different as a result of the thing that I'm going to give you, can be a great way to set those expectations up front.
Right. What decision?
I'm not sure if that
I
actually.
just think it's a higher bar than saying, tell me what the measurable business outcome is.
Yeah.
I think you have to say, what is that measure? And is there a threshold above or below for which we will make a different decision?
Yeah.
Because a lot of the times you can do all the research in the world, say it's 3.8, and they say, okay, interesting data. but unless they tell you if it's above 4, we're going to flip the decision or close the door
Mhm.
or fail fast, then it's useless. And I think establishing that ahead
Uh-huh.
of starting a project will allow you to see that some projects are not informative enough to do, and you can prune them out.
Yeah, those are such valuable advice. The only nuance there I'll say is I think it depends on organizational maturity. And you got to start somewhere, and if you're starting with an organization where there's just sort of like this expectation that it's a service desk and you can just ask, I want, give me a spreadsheet that has this, that in it, and there's no expectation of using it for anything. Starting with the, what decision will flip if I give you this might be too far to go in the beginning. Yeah, I think it's something you need to warm up to.
I
But
think
it's
it's a
definitely where
direction
we
you
both
need to
start.
take, because otherwise maybe half the stuff you're doing is not useful.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. I see folks typing, so I'm going to give them time to type.
Okay.
Hey, while they're typing too, and I got to ask you this, your
Right.
slides are showing the next bullet points in this like dark burn-in style. Is that like a feature that you're using?
It came with my slide template and I can't figure out how to disable it. Is it good or
Okay.
bad?
I'm like, well, this is an interesting. I wonder if she's doing it intentionally or not, but I can see all your future points.
You can. You have good eyes. It helps me because I don't have my speaker's notes on. But I also realize it gives it away to people with
Right.
good vision. I don't know.
It's not distracting. You can't, I mean, you have to have really good eyes to be able to actually read them. You can tell how many points there are, but you can't read them.
If we're still waiting for other questions, I actually have a question for Ronnie and perhaps others on this call, who are experts in experimentation. For experimentation programs, is this a solved problem? Or do you have like a great systematic way for saying this is how we prove the value of our entire program? Or is it like a piece of it that you can say we have a system for this piece of it? But when you extend beyond it, then you're facing the
I
problem.
think it's mostly solved in the places that I worked. I wanted to make sure that we have the key business metrics that we're able to impact, even if other metrics were not directly translatable. So, when I worked at Microsoft in several groups, we had the ability to say, this is the incremental dollar value that was generated because of experiments. And this is the dollar value that we helped prevent the loss because we aborted experiments really early. I mean, that second part is actually something that people miss. The fact that you can abort an experiment in 2 hours instead of letting it run for 3 days before somebody yells, that is huge value. And so I think in many cases it was a solved issue. There are other metrics that are harder to translate about user value and things like that, but I think it's much easier. And this is why I love experimentation. I used to do more machine learning, data analysis like you're doing. And I think the fact that we're in the product groups impacting their shipped releases, to me, is a lot more fun.
Yeah.
Matt Gershoff says, thanks, June. Any concern that process of evaluation becomes in and of itself, so it just becomes something that people just feel like they have to cover themselves rather than procedure that improves the value of information?
Yeah. Well, first of all, Matt, the fact that you're here means that your flight's delayed. So I'm sorry. I thought you weren't going to show up.
You guys phoned though, but still.
Yeah. Oh, okay. To Matt's question, I've actually had some exchanges with other people who've seen my talk already who have expressed similar concern about
He's running
the fact that if you don't watch out, it can tracking actionable insights can incentivize bad behavior among analysts, and it might actually wind up rewarding the wrong kind of thing. So you have to tread very carefully when you do this, right? So if it is just like the people who get the reward are the ones who insert themselves in some process that's going to lead to an action and decision, then it's just the people who are really good at working the way into that kind of process that get rewarded for it. Right. And that some an example that I might speak about in general terms would be a group of analysts that supports a sales organization. And you can say, like, I delivered an analysis that was attached to this deal, and this deal was worth this much. And so, you know, here's my contribution to that business outcome. But and again, you know, an analyst can say, well, yeah, oh yeah, I did an analysis. And even if it wasn't a meaningful analysis, if it gets attached to a deal that closed, they're going to get that credit for it. Worst case scenario, if it comes time to say, oh, you know, we need to think about potentially downsizing this team, which of our analysts are most effective, you don't want this kind of thing to be used for that. Right.
Wow.
So, yeah. So tread carefully.
Yeah. Florent points out to your question, is measuring the value of experimentation programs a solved problem? You know, that iceberg behind Ronnie tells a story that he has shared many times. And I want to point out there's also a mountain peak upon which Ronnie sits. I think Florent is right when he says, I think it's solved in some sense in the abstract, but in practice, Ronnie sits at a peak that most of the industry has not achieved. It's often really hard, as Florent points out, to turn into a compelling argument that most organizations will accept in the experimentation world. There are many organizations that have accomplished it and understand it and accept it and put it into practice, but it's also a very, very slippery slope. And a lot of them don't understand the practice, don't do it right, and they will start making false claims and put things into the P&L that they shouldn't be doing. And so they do it incorrectly, inaccurately, and very dangerously. So there's that dangerous, instead of being on the top of the mountain, they actually do, you know, the dangerous waters exercise that actually hurts them instead of helping them. So there's two sides of the story there when it comes to measuring the value of experimentation.
Yeah. So my question back to you, Kelly, and others is, we're episode 64, right? In any of your prior episodes, are there really good talks on this kind of problem, like how to get to that peak that Ravi is that Ronnie is at, or like regrets I have about like things I've done wrong, or you know, if not, I want to see that talk.
Number, but Tone Vesling had a great talk about it, and he also taught a class on talking about it and how, you know, if you do it the wrong way, how that, you know, the additive errors can cause some problems, which unfortunately a lot of programs are doing. So that's the danger that you can get into with the icebergs. So,
wow.
Yeah. Jen Kuhn says, is optimization proven value a solved problem? Depends. Are tests informing product UX decisions, or are tests just proving that what the product UX folks wanted to do is a thing that won't tank your conversions?
Yeah.
That's another. Yeah. And how are experimentation programs being used? Some of them are being used to just, you know, validate decisions that are already being made. Some of them, you know, are only being used in, you know, on the product side. Some of them are only being used on the marketing side. Some of them are being used on both. Some of them are just feature flag. I mean, experimentation is such a broad term.
Yeah.
It's, you know.
Up a level from that, though, I think everything that you just said can also be applied to the practice of
Yep.
analytics in general, you know, and I have seen analysis projects come through all, and the end result is, yes, that validates what we already know, you know, it's not just experiments, it's other things too. And pockets of excellence and say, you know, we're doing a really great job over here delivering value in marketing, but we're ignoring product or vice versa. I see that a lot.
Yeah, absolutely. Corey says probably depends on the feature. Google's glacial rollout of the phasing out of third-party cookies is to ensure it won't tank what is driving 90% of their revenue. Yeah.
Just one other observation I have on companies' analytics practices being really advanced or behind in one area versus another. I find that that weighting tends to align with the values of the company and where they are placing a financial investment. And so for companies that are like, we're developing product, we're all about product, they build a really strong product analytics practice and they might not do much with marketing. And vice versa, if you say, oh yeah, we're all about marketing, like we have a massive marketing budget, we need to make sure we're optimizing it, they're going to have a really strong marketing analytics practice. I've seen that.
Right. Any final questions for June? Florence says thanks.
Oh, you're welcome. It's good to see so many familiar faces here. Thank you.
All right. Reminder, everyone, unlike normal, we have a talk next week on privacy, and it's going to be a panel conversation. And so please join us next Friday, same time. It's going to be a lot of fun. We're going to talk about privacy and ethics, and I think it's exactly the same time, and I'm going to have a co-host. So Juliana Jackson is going to join me. We're going to have a lot of fun. And so see you next time, same time. Thanks, June. I'll have the recording up in an hour or so, and I'll post it on the TLC recordings and on YouTube. See you all next week.
Thank you.
Bye all.
Kelly.
Have a great weekend.
Chelsea.